As I give this introduction, my personality is on display. Feel free to use your awareness to notice my personality functions. I'll point out some of my behaviors here and there to help make some future points about personality.
Hey there, welcome everyone. Welcome to a presentation on the personality functions. This will be an introduction to start talking about some features of the personality through this particular lens that was proposed by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist. He was actually a student of Sigmund Freud, and he veered from his teacher though, and actually was very prolific and creative in terms of his way of viewing the personality and working with psychology, and he is just super influential in the field of psychology. I don't remember when he died, but it was, I think, in the 80s maybe, or maybe his last writings were in the 80s, but very prolific writer. And you may have heard of the term archetype. Carl Jung is the one who coined that term, and he really went deeply into studying dreams as a part of his work, and came up with his model. He uses terms like the conscious, the collective unconscious, like those types of words were very much a part of his way of describing the personality. And so I'm going to talk about his ideas on the personality functions, because at least for me, I really feel like it's a super valuable model or lens to use to kind of like help give our inner trainer a particular map to use to look out at the world and to look inward at our personalities, in a way helping us to maybe give us some clues about maybe what to look for as we're growing our awareness skills. So these personality functions that I want to talk about, they are, let's see, personality. Oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. I'm kind of like my brain was going off in another direction, like I forgot to say this one thing, but here we go. Okay, so the personality functions. So Carl Jung talked about personality functions. They have to do with these two different functions, really basic functions that he noticed that the personality seemed to do. And the personality seemed to be, and I kind of just really gravitate towards this view. It seems like I just kind of agree or see things the same way. Like the personality seems to be this life unit it's pretty mysterious for sure, but in terms of its function and what it seems like it's doing is that it seems like it's helping the organism of Becca to come up with some sort of framework that when I am taking in information, it helps me to know, it helps me to kind of like categorize things and have like a model of what's safe, what's not safe, and help me to make decisions in the future. I think I talked about that in the last little video. So how, the thing that I want to talk about with these personality functions is a little bit of like how the life unit goes about doing that. So if a life unit has awareness, well, awareness is taking in observations about just what is in the environment. And then I also mentioned previously this notion of like being able to predict what might be is kind of like it's a form of awareness. And Carl Jung was picking up on a similar thing. He talked about an observer personality function. And an observer personality function, the way that he saw it, had two types. There was a sensation function and an intuition function. And these two functions give a personality the ability to make observations either through sensing something directly, that's the sensation function, or through this process of intuition, which is more about like imagining what might be, or imagining why, imagining how, imagining what's over that hill. Thinking about a personality in terms of an evolution, from an evolutionary perspective, and this way of having awareness of intuition could really help an organism to survive if it could make predictions about where there could possibly be food. So the observer functions, sensation, and intuition is what Carl Jung laid out. And so I think that it just applies, maps directly to what I'm talking about with awareness. So the other decider function that Carl Jung set out is the decider functions. And the decider functions have to do with how we make choices and how we actually do things in the world. Because when we make a choice about something, of course, we can make an internal choice, but a lot of times what we're doing is we're making choices and we're taking action. So, and making choices and taking action, as like what the personality might do, it can do it in two ways, two primary ways, and they are to make decisions based on feeling or based on thinking. And so we will get more into talking about and parsing apart like the nuances of those particular definitions, but this is just more of an introduction at this point. But so thinking would be making decisions based on logical, rational reasons. It's much more of a mental way of making decisions versus making a decision based on how you feel. And in a way, that expression of following one's gut, that feeling decider, is much more of a body-based feeling sense of what the choice needs to be, which option this or option that. Well, I just feel this way in my gut. Feeling can also often have to do with what really matters, or what really has a value in a feeling sense, more of like a connected feeling type of a sense, versus much more rational, calculated, add up the numbers, crunch the numbers type of a way of making a decision. And so these functions that Carl Jung laid out, which are basic primary functions of a personality in his system, they can operate in two different ways. Each of them can operate in two different main ways. And they are in either a divergent way or a convergent way. And the terminology that he used an extroverted term and an introverted term to describe these, what did he call them? What did he call them? It starts with an A. Oh, come on, brain. I'm going to just give you a little illustration of the sensory versus the intuition, and why this whole knowing your personality can help you, and it can help you to set goals for training. My personality type, I just am what I go based on, and like this is my truth. Maybe other people do see me externally differently, but I see myself as struggling with sensory data to keep it really nice and organized and really specific and narrowed down. So coming up with something like a specific name that some author used for an attitude, I think it's the attitude is what he called it. So coming up with that word, I struggle with that. But like conceptually, to have this big cloud and to understand, oh, this is what Carl Jung was talking about. Like, I get it. It's somewhere in here, but it's not necessarily always a really discrete little sensory data point. So knowing that about myself, my trainer can have me work on that and practice that and see where my over tendency to use my intuition function and my underdeveloped sensation function has led to some of my big life challenges. And if I take on the challenge of learning how to grow my sensation function, then I will basically have more access, more fluidity, more mobility, more unity in my personality if I'm able to get better at that particular skill. So the other thing about these functions that we're looking at is the way that they're set out. They're set out as these polarities. So, sensation versus intuition, and thinking versus feeling. And the interesting thing about them, the way that they're laid out, we can actually talk about them from those polarities of practice that I talked about in the physicality portion. Because the sensation versus intuition is often kind of described a little bit as it's a little bit described as a top to bottom polarity, or sorry, I guess I'd say bottom to top, sensation to intuition, because that sensation function is more associated with like the reptilian brain function compared to more of the intuition function, which is a little bit more mammalian function. And so it's kind of this top to bottom quality. And every person has all of these, every person can do all of these things. So then the other thing, the thinking and feeling, those are very often pretty common. We talk about the left and the right brain, with the left brain being the more analytical side and the right brain being the more creative side, right? So we can kind of look at those, the thinking and feeling polarity, as left and right. So polarities abound, and then we apply on top of those polarities another polarity of, Carl Jung used the term extroverted and introverted, which I kind of prefer the more like the more divergent or convergent way of looking at that polarity. It's the same thing. You can use the different terms, but sometimes introverted and extroverted definitely do have a lot of kind of colloquial meanings for different people. So it can get a little confusing when you're splitting hairs. But what we're going to do, we don't need to know all of the little details of this specific theory, but it's going to help, because it's going to just at least provide a little bit of a framework of some different polarities that we can get a little awareness of, a little knowledge of, and then we can use them to look at our personalities. And it can be useful because we might learn something that we didn't know about ourselves before. And it might help our inner trainers to be able to choose a goal for us to train. We might notice something, an area where we have some improvement. I'll get more into the details, and when we get to that in a couple weeks, but that's going to be coming up with the personality training, and we'll also be looking at some other polarities that come out of combining some of these attributes of the personality as a life unit. So depending on how you use your awareness and your intention together, you can get different qualities of how you actually produce behaviors in the world. And there's going to be a polarity that we'll look at, which is called a play-sleep polarity. And then there's another polarity that we'll look at, which is a consume-blast polarity. So those are going to be interesting and really fun to dive into. Yeah, so what else with this little intro into the personality functions? So, all right, so that's a good introduction. I hope it's kind of long. Anyway, thank you everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this, and we will connect again soon. Have a good one.